What's going on, y'all? Today's video, I just wanted to share some things that I've been doing recently with value studies and how they can maybe help you if you're somebody who struggles with color, or if you feel like your colors in your paintings never really feel like they work. This could be something that helps you out, maybe a practice that you can implement that could really help your colors out. So let's get into it. I have this little chart here of these notes that I have that we'll go through as we go through this video. It shouldn't be too long of a video, but I just wanted to talk about a few things. So the first thing is basically we should talk about what is color, or what ingredients are needed in any color. And those three things would be hue, saturation, and value. So you can think of color as maybe like a cake. And the three ingredients needed to make that cake would be hue, saturation, and value. And with these three elements, you can get any color that you can think of. And so what are each? We'll just go through these quickly. Hue is basically just all the colors on a rainbow, pretty much. So you go from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And they can be anything in between. So basically any shade of the local color of an object. So if it's a red apple, the hue of the apple is red. If it's a yellow car, the hue of the car is yellow. So that is what hue is. Saturation is basically the intensity or the richness of the hue. So if we're talking about the apple, how rich or how vibrant is that red? Is it more of a dull apple? It would fall somewhere more on this side of the spectrum, or is it more of a rich, vibrant apple? And in which case it would be more on this end of the spectrum. So higher saturation basically means higher richness, higher vibrancy, and lower saturation means more washed out or more of a dull gray feel the further you go this way on the spectrum. And finally, value, which is what we're going to be talking today about. Value is, put simply, just the brightness or the darkness of an object. So that apple, for example, it could be a dull red apple. So maybe somewhere the hue would be like red. Maybe it's more of a duller red apple. But what's the value? So how dark or how light would it be? It could be a darker red apple, or it could be a much lighter red apple. So again, these three elements here are the three, really all you need to get any color that you can think of. And we can see those same things if we go to these sliders here on any, usually on any digital software, any color sliders, you can find them. So the H would be hue, the S would be saturation, and the B would be value. It's also known as brightness or lightness. So you might see HSB sliders or HSL sliders. That's the same thing as value. And of course, if we look at the classic color palette here, the square, these would be the more saturated colors on the right side. As you go further down, we would get darker. And as you go more towards the left, these are the more the grays and the desaturated colors. So just keep those three things in mind: hue, saturation, and value. Every time you're thinking about color, you should ask yourself, what is the hue, what is the saturation, and what is the value? And here I just have this would be basically just another scale. It's just a gradient version of this value scale here. So it's the same thing, but you can see we have the lights up here at the top. And as we go down further, we have these darker values. I say all this to basically show you that there are three main parts of a color, but sometimes it can get a little confusing because that can be a lot to think of. Because if we're thinking of an apple, for example, I have an apple here. If we're thinking of an apple, like this image of an apple here, we want to paint this as a study. There's a lot to think about here. So not only do we have to think about the hue of the apple, which is, again, remember the actual respective color, but we also have to think of the saturation and the value. And so, for example, this area here of the apple, we can see we have some pinks in here. We have some lighter, more white pinks on the highlights. We have some oranges right here. We have some darker reds right here. And it begins to be a lot for us to remember and to think about at once. So especially if we're new to colors and if we're new to trying to figure all this stuff out, it can be a lot to study at once. So what I like to do is, because again, remember, we're thinking about the hue, the saturation, and the value all at once. So that's three different things we have to think about. So what I like to do sometimes, especially if you're new to color theory and if you're just trying to learn things, it may be really helpful for you to just desaturate the image, and it will get something like this. So this is the same apple here. These are the same two apples. They're just, this one is desaturated and this one has the color in it. And so what we've done here is removed all of this confusion here. And now all we have is areas of lightness and areas of darkness. And we don't have to worry about those pinks in the highlights. We don't have to worry about those oranges or those dark reds. All we have to worry about is what part of the value spectrum do these different things lie on. So for example, this is a light spot or a highlight of the apple, probably somewhere in this area of the spectrum. This whole shape of the apple here can almost be grouped into one value, somewhere along this, probably this area of the spectrum, of the value spectrum. But the point is, instead of having to think about all these changes in color, for example, right here, you see this shift in the hue from here, and then right here, these are all different shifts as we go around the apple. Even right here, you can see this part is a different color than this. Of course, like I said, we have these pinks in there. Desaturating it takes all that out, like I said, and all we have to think about is just this one whole area as a gray value. So hopefully that makes sense. It's basically, again, just a way to simplify things. And once we can, if you think of these three sections here, those three ingredients for the cake that we talked about, what we're doing is basically taking out this, the hue, and taking out this, the saturation. And all that leaves us with is the value. So you can see that that clears up a lot of space for us to think about things without having to add too much complexity. And so you may wonder what's so special about the values, or like why are we doing value studies? Why not saturation studies or hue studies? And the answer to that would be that values, you can think of values basically as the foundation or the building blocks of color. So without good values, everything else won't really work too well. So if you think of a building and you think of the foundation of the building, that's probably the most important part of the building, because without a good foundation, then the building will collapse. And it doesn't matter how many nice decorations or nice furnishings you put in the building. If you don't have a good foundation and a good base, then the building won't stand well. And it's the same thing applied with color here. So if you don't have a good value structure, and if your foundation of your colors aren't good, then it doesn't really matter what hue this apple is, right? It doesn't matter how saturated it is. And just to showcase that, I have this same apple here, but I've increased the values. So the values are off now. And you can immediately tell that it doesn't read well. The forms don't read well, and it just doesn't look as realistic. But it does, and we can change the sliders here. I can make it more saturated. That doesn't help. I can change the hue. That doesn't help, right? But if we change the value back to where it was, and the values are correct, then what we can do is change the hue, and it still works. And you can see this apple still looks realistic if I make it green, or if I make it an unrealistic color like blue. It doesn't really matter. I can even make it more saturated and it still works. The forms still read. The apple still feels like it's real, even though it looks heavily edited. The point is that the values are good, so the image still reads. So again, just to keep that in mind, values are the foundation of your colors, and if you have good foundation, then the rest of the building will most likely stand really well. Now, of course, you can have like what we just did. This apple could be too saturated and it doesn't look good because the saturation is too high. Or we could have a blue apple, for example. It doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying like if you're doing environment paintings and you have, if you have like these vibrant rainbow skies. It may not always work if they're super saturated and your whole image is saturated. So of course there is importance in understanding saturation and hue as well. But what I'm saying is they don't matter as much as value does, because value is the readability of your image. So hopefully that makes sense, what I'm saying there with the values. Since value is the fundamental and the foundation of all color, that's why we can do value studies. So I'll give some examples here of some value studies I've been doing recently. So these two images here, this one and this one, are my studies that I did from these respective references that I got. So basically I just got a reference like this one, for example, and I studied this reference, and what you can do is you can take the reference photo and basically just turn down the saturation and then just study it this way. So we're not thinking about, is this boat blue or red or green? Is it a very saturated blue? What color is the water? What color is the sky? I'm not worrying about any of that. The only thing I'm worrying about is this portion of the boat in shadow? If so, yes, and then we go from there. But you see, like, or for example, this side of the boat is being hit by light, and that's reflected here in the reference. And the same thing with these rocks. I did the same thing here. Basically, just got a reference image, turn the saturation down, so I'm not focused on all the color and all the all the unnecessary noise that we don't need to worry about. And I'm just seeing it for a grayscale image. And then from there, that's 2/3, like I said up here, we're taking out 2/3 of the 3 ingredient recipe. So 2/3 of the recipes out. All we need to think about is 33% of what we would have had to think about, which is just value, right? So that makes it a lot easier, or it clears a lot of stuff up. And so what this also helps us focus on, since we're not focusing on hue and saturation, it frees up room to focus on shape language. So for example, what's the shape of these rocks, and how can I reflect that in this reference here, or in this study here rather? How can we incorporate storytelling, whether that be having a character in the scene, or whether that be whatever the case is? How can we focus on lighting? So just making sure that the lighting is really good in our study. So it just frees up room for us to focus on other areas of our art and of our creative process, and it still helps us get familiar and practice values, which, even though we're not painting with color, and it may seem like we're not getting better with our colors because we're doing grayscale studies, we actually are. When we go back and paint with colors, at that point, we'll have a better understanding of the foundation of the colors themselves. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. It shouldn't be too long of a video, but it is just a quick, I guess, tip for anybody who's struggling with colors, anybody who's having a hard time just getting a grasp on those things. I do recommend to just break it down to the basics and make sure you have your foundation and your fundamentals good. And in this case, the fundamentals and the foundation will be the values. So try to practice those and try to make it easier on yourself. Remove some of the complexity and see how it does. And it may help you out. You may find that your values need a lot of work, and maybe you realize, like, maybe my paintings weren't looking good, or maybe you feel like your colors weren't looking good, and you weren't really looking in the right place to fix them. Like maybe you weren't realizing the values were the actual problem, and that has been the case for me for sure. So yeah, maybe this is something that can help you too. I do have a Patreon page if you're interested in. I have free brushes on there. I have also extended brush pack on there if you're a subscriber to my Patreon. I got tutorial PSD files on there. I have some stuff on there. So if you're interested, I'll put the link in the description of this video. And I do appreciate all the support and all the time and attention that y'all give me for this content and for these videos. So I appreciate the love. Thank y'all, and I will be making more videos soon. Let me know if y'all have any topics in particular that y'all want to hear about or that y'all want to see. So thank y'all, and I'll see y'all later.